both systems coaching as well as content coaching. Probably going to concentrate just a bit more about content coaching because that may be the one that is more skill heavy. However, we're going to give you some resources and ideas for systems coaching as well. The files that are attached or uploaded that are at the left side, at least on my screen, they're on the left side. There's several files of some of the tools that you're going to see me show you throughout this training so that you'll be able to have access to them and possibly try using them. Okay, so we'll get started with the first one. We're going to assume you can read these. And the first thing about coaching, tier 3, is you have to have something to coach, right? You can't coach in the absence of any content or a process. So what we do need at tier 3 is the same processes that we have at both tiers 1 and 2. We need to have a clear, structured process that is allowing school districts and teams to be able to make decisions about tier 3 supports and services and systems, as well as what specifically are the competencies and skills we need to coach in both educators who might be facilitating, for example, FBA, BIPs, as well as teachers who are going to be implementing some tier 3 individualized behavior strategies. And most what we do know is coaching is very interesting. As a lot of you who are here today, I'm sure, are coaches or serve as a coach or are doing work in coaching. And this is something that a lot of individuals and educators who are working in our schools who find themselves becoming coaches may never have received any specific training toward being a coach. Some school psychologists may get some consultation types of classes and support. However, it may be a little bit different than what we call actually like practice-based coaching or some of the coaching that we're using in our work now. One of the things I want to ask you and think about this is this a fact or a myth? And if you guys want to, you can even put into the chat, do you think this is a fact or a myth? Although this could be a setup, right? We cannot do tier 3 until we have tiers 1 and 2 implemented with Fidelity. Do you think that's true, or is that a myth? Oh, Deanne is right on it. We know Deanne is engaged. And Jared? I'll give a couple more minutes to see if there's anybody who disagrees yet. Well, thank you. We got 3 responses, and we're assuming the rest of you said, oh, that's just what we would have written, so why bother writing? It is a myth. Even though there seems to be this popular opinion in many districts that you can't address tier 3 supports and systems until you are implementing tiers 1 and 2 with Fidelity, our response to that would be you'll never be implementing tier 3 supports and systems because it's tough to implement any systemic change or any processes across an entire district with Fidelity, let alone making that a standard of readiness before you address tier 3. So we're of the opinion that you would want to be addressing your tiers simultaneously or concurrently so that your kids, 100% of your kids, will be supported through behavior. So one of the things before we talk about what you actually will coach with tiers with tier 3, both systems and supports, is this is what we know about tier 3 systems. Unfortunately, right now, it is not being viewed as a systemic process in most schools. A lot of times what schools and districts will say is we're doing FBA and BIPs, and they consider that as their entire tier 3 system. Often the FBA BIPs are not probably developed in the way we would hope they'd be developed, that with what we call sometimes at least being technically adequate, that result in improved outcomes for kids, teachers implementing behavioral support plans. Those ineffective tier 3 systems and supports, if they're not in place, can actually impact some of your other indicators that may result in you having to have some mandated activities by Florida DOE, including Restraint and seclusion, often the students are getting restraint or seclusion incidents are kids who need tier 3 individualized support. Suspensions and expulsions, as well as disproportionality. If you have kids who are being suspended, especially if they're ESE kids who are Black, they're being suspended at high rates. They may not have an FBA BIP, which means they're not getting the individualized supports perhaps that they need, or may not have some really good effective behavioral intervention plans to prevent the behaviors that result in the suspensions and expulsions. So all of these, having a better tier 3 system can really impact some of these other indicators by which we're measured. We will be talking a little bit about our coaching for content, specifically about FBA and BIPs, because we consider the FBA BIP to be the core practice of tier 3. Just as tier 1 seems to have a core features of what you have for a basic tier 1 support system, as well as tier 2. Tier 3, we consider that the FBA BIP is your foundation or your start of your infrastructure of what your strategies will be. However, they will be expanding because the FBA BIP process alone cannot address every single student who might need individualized behavior and support. So it will not be enough to sustain an entire tier 3 system. I believe I gave you this because the link that usually we use for it changes often. This is a blueprint we wrote as a state a couple of years ago. And for those of you who are working with the PBIS project and improving your tier 3 supports, you already have access to this and are using it or glancing at it. It's being used to help drive your action plans. For the others, this is just a refresher that we did write a blueprint that provides guidelines for a framework for having a tier 3 system of support so that you're moving from more compliance-based to results-driven systems. This will help you for thinking about both systems and content coaching. What are the things that are necessary? And will give you that basis for what is needed or necessary. And so this is just a little reminder of the blueprint is not prescriptive, it's guidelines. And if you're going to be a systems coach, meaning you're going to help your district or a school team even address how are we going to have improved tier 3 systems, these are the basic 5 guidelines that we feel need to be present in all tier 3 systems. And if you are the coach, you have to understand what each of these mean to help guide your teams to be able to address these set goals for these and establish action steps to reach these goals. So the first one is all educators understand what is a tier 3 system of behavior support, because we find that there are misunderstandings. 2, that educators have the belief, knowledge, and skills to implement and sustain tier 3. And what we describe in the blueprint is that different educators need a different set of skills. Some need very high level of skills, whereas some may need awareness level of skills. There also need to be, number 3, sufficient professional supports to be provided to educators so they can implement tier 3. And that needs to have embedded coaching, which again touches on our topic today. The 4th one is there needs to be some infrastructure so that you can actually do evidence-based practices and be able to evaluate them. One of the big infrastructure needs is having data systems to be able to make database decisions, as well as having consistent processes and products. And then the 5th one is we want to make sure that policies, procedures, and practices are aligned so they're consistent across the schools in your district. The district is in alignment with the state needs and processes. So when we talk about the coaching, we're going to be talking today about 2 different levels. The systems coaching is where you're actually coaching groups or teams to implement systemic processes and systems types of approaches. So some examples are you're going to facilitate your team to guide all of district educators to implement and sustain tier 3 supports for all students. Content coaching would be you're coaching educators to implement specific strategies or specific skills. And there's a couple of different coaching levels there. You could be a coach who's going to coach peers. So if you're a school psychologist or a behavior specialist or a behavior analyst or a guidance counselor, you might be coaching other peers of like positions to do more of an FBA BIP process. How do you facilitate a team to do an evidence-based process? And you would also be wanting to coach teachers to implement the behavior interventions that are either developed through that FBA and BIP, or maybe other strategies that you're going to implement that are individualized, but you want to make sure the teacher is able to do them correctly, and be able to sustain them. So the coaching of content can come at two different levels. So we're going to talk about the systems level coaching first, and we're going to show you some tools and examples that we've used. And again, you have access to all of these tools that I'm going to show you. They're going to be floating in. They're going to be screenshots, so they're not going to be real big, but they're all included and uploaded on this Adobe platform. So one of the things we want to talk about first is, which we always want to start with, is what do you need to have for characteristics or skills to be a good, effective coach? And these are not just things we think, oh, these are nice to have, but actually there is some research on what some of these items should be. And this comes from the National Center on Quality Teaching and Learning. So there's three different sets. First of all, having positive working relationships. You can know your stuff, right? But if you're not a nice person, nobody likes you, nobody will want to sit with you and work with you. So you have to have these approachable demeanors. You have to be able to have others respect that they see you as somebody who is capable of supporting and coaching them. You have to actually care, and even if you're pretending, it has to look genuine. So it does help if you're genuinely caring of that you're vested in the district or whoever you're working with the systems, that you want them to improve. You want them to do well and succeed. And you have to continue to be positive, especially in light of Tier 3. Tier 3 is the toughest tier. I personally love it because that's my background, is behavioral interventions for kids who have emotional behavior disorders or ADHD or autism. So, I've been working in this for years and years, and it's my love. Others that may not be that much in love or passionate about it, and it's hard work because you may just get little bits of growth at a time. So you have to really stay positive when you're doing systems coaching. Then you have to also have some competency in how you facilitate groups. So these require some skills in group facilitation. You have to know what the scope and sequence is of how to get teams to work on goal setting and strategic action planning. You have to know how to get groups to trust you and trust each other, as well as do a lot of and understand how to do constructive reflection. I'm going to show you a couple of things when we get into content coaching on how to do individualized reflection that could actually, you could use some of that as well for or adaptations of it for group reflection. You have to have opportunities for open discussion. So you want to be less of, when you're a coach, the expert telling people, but instead you want to be asking, guiding, and providing a platform for people to really have rich discussions so they can reach consensus, which is your other competency in group facilitation, is knowing different ways of being able to get group consensus. Because if you all have been working in schools as long as I have been, it's kind of hard to get a group of very opinionated educators sitting in one room to all agree on the same thing in the same way. So we have to have a way of at least having consensus so that we'll be willing to be all in support of moving ahead with these actions and ideas. And then you have to have technical skills. For Tier 3, you really, if you're going to be a Tier 3 systems coach, you have to understand those guidelines that are in the blueprint. And you have to be able to understand them enough. You don't have to have the expertise or the content being a systems coach to know how to, for example, do an FBA, BIP, let's say. But you do have to have enough of an understanding to be able to help the district problem solve if that's an area where they need to improve. And so those are the kind of things that you would need to know at the systems level. So when we do Tier 3 systems as a coach, what we train others to do if they're going to be learning the Tier 3 systems coaching process is we want to first be able to know when we work with any district is what Tier 3 systemic features are already in place because we don't want to start over from the ground up if some things are already going well. So we have to figure out what are our data, our starting data, to be able to make improvements upon and know what we are already great in. So we have a district interview that we have uploaded. So it's for yours to share, as well as we evaluate functional behavior assessment and behavior intervention plans for their technical adequacy. So the interview, and you're just going to see a very small screenshot here. The interview is usually done by a coach. In cases now, it's me, but if you were going to do this with your own district, it could be you, where you're going to provide this interview to your team members, your district team members, and what you want to do is be able to give this interview to your team and be able to probe enough to understand the responses, because you don't just want yes no responses. Most of these are more open-ended. They're supposed to describe some processes they have in place and describe how it would look across the district. You would want to know this interview well enough so that you are able to probe until you're satisfied that you have enough of the information. The functional behavior technical adequacy tool for evaluation, as we call it, the TATE. And this picture is actually for Don, because he loves potatoes, any kind of potatoes, I think. And he likes thinking of the TATE as a revised tool, so he can call it a tater, so then it makes him think of tater tots. Any of you who know Don understand that analogy perfectly. If you don't know Don, you just have to know he likes food. He's skinny, but he likes food. So the TATE is something that we can provide you from the project training on. If you would like to learn how to use the TATE, some of you who know FBA BIPs very well already wouldn't even need us to train you on this. You could read the scoring tool as well as the rubric and be able to figure it out on your own. So this is something that could be a future training, could be a future chat as well for next year. It could be a training delivered to your district. We've done it in districts as well, so districts can score their own FBA BIPs. If you are coaching a district, though, you want to know how well are they doing their core behavioral intervention strategy and behavioral intervention practice, which is the FBA BIP process. The TATE allows you to do a quantitative score of their technical adequacy. Typically, we ask for a random sample of FBA BIPs. Most often, we ask for about 10, unless it's a really small district. We can take as little as 5. And using the TATE, we evaluate 18 components, 9 for the FBA, 9 for the BIP. Scores range for each item between 0, 1, and 2, with 0 being it's not present, 2 meaning it's technically adequate, and 1 meaning it's emerging. There is a rubric that guides you to the correct scoring, or at least guides you to select the closest score that seems to represent what was reflected in whatever response they put in their FBA BIP product. What you end up with is a percentage scores between 0 and 100% of how technically adequate is their FBA, how technically adequate is the BIP, and the overall product. What this allows you to do as a coach is be able to establish a starting point for the district of where do we need to start this conversation. We have the interview that describes our processes that we're doing in Tier 3 that's aligned with the blueprint. We have our foundational FBA BIP evaluation to see how well and how technically adequate our FBA BIPs are. Now, based on all of this information, where do we need to start improving? Where are we strong? Where are we in most need to start working? From the technical adequacy and interview, we have reports. So one of the things as a coach is how do you summarize this information so that the district team can make best sense of it and be able to quickly see where are we strong, where are we weak. So this is an example of a template for the interview report, in which we align the responses with each of the Tier 3 guidelines in the blueprint. And then for the technical adequacy report, we have a template that we'd be happy to share with you that I may not have uploaded, but a template that describes each and every item and their score on the item. We also on the report provide graphs. So this is an example of a district's FBA graph in which they looked at their FBA BIPs And these are the FBA scores for the 9 or 10 that were submitted. The next thing we look at when we're working with the systems is we're figuring out how now to take this information, develop a strategic action plan so we can start installing or getting a tier 3 system in place. This action plan meeting, as we already said, you're going to, as a coach, help the district reflect on their strengths and their needs, and then help support them to develop long-term goals and visions, often 5 years out, then categorize different areas of need based on that long-term vision. How are they going to get to it? What will their district need to do? And what are some of those one-year goals that we can start mapping out? Then being able to figure out how to prioritize those different areas of need so that we can figure out what we need to work on first, immediately, and what some might be able to wait for a few months or even a year or so. And from those needs, we develop measurable goals, so the coach would help the team do that, as well as start doing identifiable immediate tasks that are going to be accomplished, and being able to establish benchmarks that will help your team determine, are we going to meet our target for this year? So some of the systems things are probably things you already are doing, is my thought. A lot of things that, though, you might not be aware of, and these are some of the things that help coaches, is there's a lot of different brainstorming consensus building processes. If you really like to learn more about these, we could do a training on it or a chat on them, or I also have a form that I've shared with a couple of districts, and I know I didn't upload this because I'm always in a hurry and running behind, so I forget to upload things. I can upload a document on brainstorming and consensus building that has a lot of these examples. So on the left, you see this is an activity called card storming, where we can get the whole team to come up with what are some things that we think our district should immediately do in the next few months to be able to help us reach our 5-year goal. The coach would be the person who would do the probe and set up this activity. And then with the card storming is as people are writing down their ideas on either index cards or post-it notes, there's various adaptations you can do. The coach or facilitator, sometimes we call them, would be taking all of these ideas from the team members and then trying to sort them into categories that seem to be similar across them. And as you can see in that card storming picture, this one has 4 different categories in which they're looking at different things that would help them do more inclusive activities, include kids in general ed settings, is this picture. So they're looking at what are some of the things they have to address, what are the big issues in this case, and then underneath, how can they address each of those issues. So card storming can be used for many things, but it's a way of getting input from every single person who's sitting around the table, so you don't have one person dominating the conversation or one person not saying anything at all. Equal input from everyone, and then you're able to get them to reflect upon their responses by saying, do these sound in the right category? How are we now going to prioritize them? You can prioritize with card storming by asking people to do nominated group processes or voting processes, and which one do they think should be addressed first, second, and third. So they can do a nominated ranking as well, or dots or money, dollar signs put next to each one to be able to indicate where they think they should spend the most resources. So again, all of these are described in a handout that we have that are brainstorming consensus building processes. And again, I can provide that to people if they're really interested in learning more about those. The other one on the right side is kind of be able to get a nice good conversation going, a discussion about what's already working in the district. Sometimes we tend to think our district, oh my gosh, with tier 3, we're just so overwhelmed with what we have to do. Sometimes it's nice to say, what are we already doing that's effective that we want to keep on doing? And this is an example of using an interconnected graphic to help really get people getting that positive outlook and say, well, we do have a lot of stuff in place. It's not impossible for us to do this. And as a coach, that's really important to also be a team leader, celebrate successes instead of dwelling on, well, we didn't do this task or we are not going to meet this goal this year. Those things happen. What we want to do is say, what have we done that really has moved us forward, and let's celebrate those. The other things that, I'm sorry, this I probably didn't animate it, that's why it didn't work. We do have action plan templates that can be used for coaches to use with their teams to get them to move forward and meet their processes. And as a coach, even if you're not going to do some of this stuff that we're showing you, like you might want the PBIS TA person to do this for you, which we certainly can. However, you might be the coach who does the ongoing support for your district team when the PBIS project isn't there, because we only come every so often. You would be meeting more often, so you would be using some of these processes to help coach. And this is just a brief example of what might be in an action plan, so you guys get an idea. The other level of coaching now is content level. This is where we're really trying to increase educator skill capacity. And we really want to be working on building capacity of supports that have evidence with them. So some examples that we are doing is building capacity, as we said before, of people who are going to be the FBA BIP facilitator. So not the person who's going to implement the interventions that are on the plan, but instead somebody who's going to coach a team or coach another person at the school to work with their team to do FBA and BIP processes. We also could have that person coach teachers once the behavior plan is implemented or developed to be able to practice implementing that behavior intervention plan and coaching that teacher. So the things that you saw early on, Tier 3 systems coaches, most of those are similar to what you need to be a content level coach. There are a few extra things, though, that you do need at this level. And this comes from McCamish et al. In 2015, so it's pretty recent. You have to, if you're going to be a content coach, you have to know the content. And I don't think there's anybody who would disagree with that. It's hard to coach somebody to do something that you don't know how to do. So you have to have that expertise. You have to know how to do practice-based coaching, which involves creating opportunities for practice and feedback. We have a structured process I'm going to share with you that we've used in another research project that is very applicable for any coaching process or coaching procedures, which is how do you have a structured coaching process in which for every person you're coaching, you're going to do the same sequence of activities. So you're going to do some practicing by modeling, you're going to do role playing, you're going to observe the person doing the skills you're trying to coach them to do, and have them reflect on how well they did, as well as you provide some debriefing and feedback and performance feedback. Those are all parts of the coaching process. You need to also understand, how do you shape skills? Not everybody's going to get to the same level of skill competency in the same as fluently as everyone else. So you have to understand how to take people from where they are and know how to shape that, what might be needed to shape it, and how to break it down into those different successions so that you'll be able to get people to reach their goals. And then how do you deliver and provide high quality professional development? As a coach, you're doing professional development not only in your coaching, but you may have to do some awareness type of presentation. So if you're going to coach something, let's say, and teach people to do a cognitive behavioral intervention such as coping cat, you would need to be able to know how to train that, first of all, how to do some good professional development, and then how to provide coaching support to people who are going to now use that strategy to intervene with kids who have anxiety disorders. So we use a combination of behavioral skills training and practice-based coaching, in which we do, you start off with every coaching process you do when you're doing skills is you kind of explain, you have a rationale, this is why we're doing this, remember what we're doing, and describing it, and then doing a model. So let's talk about, I'm going to show you how I would implement this first, or how I would guide this team, or you do this on the job. I'm going to guide the team first, you observe me and see how I guide the team in developing a definition of their problem behavior, and then we're going to debrief on how that went. Rehearsal or practice is where you actually can do role plays, as well as observing the person in the authentic situation doing the skill you're coaching them on, and then doing that reflection and feedback. So the coaching process actually has a lot of reflection and feedback on the part of the adult who's being coached. So now we're going to talk about how we coach teachers to implement behavior strategies. So these are some examples. Now these come from another project that I am adapting into work with behavioral FBA, BIP kind of processes. But this is an example of what we would want to have in all coaches' hands. So if you're going to be a coach, or you have a coaching process, you're hiring coaches in your district, you want to have a coaching manual, because you want coaches to be doing coaching in the same way. And I think coaches appreciate knowing what I'm supposed to do when I go in and coach another person or a couple of people. And so this is an example from a manual that we created in an IES research project for supporting kids who have autism spectrum disorders, and supporting teachers to implement evidence-based strategies. So every single teacher, when we teach them to do a strategy that they've developed, is we first start with modeling, and this gives a description, gives examples of what the coach does, and talks about how we might fade that. We then move next to how do we do prompting to be able to provide cues to teachers that it's now time to do this strategy, or it's now time to do this step. We have observing and providing feedback. How is the coach supposed to be doing it? Some people might think, well, those are so very basic. However, we find that even basics need to be manualized. The more manualized that you do things, the better the chances that people will be doing them with integrity. So think about how you would have this happen in your district. And this is observe and note would be another option of how observing and providing feedback. Maybe later time you're going to do debriefing, and this will be do just want to observe without interacting with the teacher, because maybe the teacher has told us, I don't want you to interact with me right now. I want to just do this, and then later on let's talk. And then these are other things. We have in our manual not only a consistent way of how we coach teachers, we also have ways of how to build rapport. If you recall from the slide earlier, we talked about you have to be approachable, you have to be respectful, you have to kind of have good people skills. These are some examples of how we establish rapport, and most educators are real good at doing this. Occasionally you might have somebody who needs a lot of help if they're going to be a coach, to kind of be more not, everybody get in a hurry sometimes to get to the intervention and get it implemented, but teachers often won't work with us if they don't like us. So this talks about different ways we might do. One of the things I really like is the help out one. Yeah, it goes right there. So this is one of the things that we know is valuable for teachers. If you're going in to coach a teacher to implement interventions, if you see that they're busy before you can get started with your coaching session or whatever you're going to do, your meeting with them, it's best to just kind of go in there and say, how can I help out? Or do you need me to do this? Or can I go ahead and help Joey over here kind of get cleaned up? Teachers or anyone appreciate when you come in and you're going to pitch in, you're going to roll up your sleeves and pitch in and help them, instead of standing and waiting while they're having their both hands and both eyes and ears and everything so full they can't even get to you to meet because they're so busy. So helping out is one great way to get that teacher to really look at you as, wow, you're really helpful, and I really like how you're helping me out. That shows that you're authentically interested in maybe, how I'm going to be doing and how things are going here. So we also have a lot of this in our coaching manuals, how to provide positive feedback. When I work with coaches, often they struggle with, how do I provide a teacher or another professional with performance feedback? It's kind of hard when you're not the supervisor and you're peer-to-peer, or you're not in a supervisory role. And so we're going to show you some more ways on how we provide positive feedback. Okay, and this again, identify successes using them as a starting point. This is an example when we do a Fidelity and a coaching sheet that we would use in our particular FBA BIP model called Prevent, Teach, Reinforce, that we have researched, and we can provide districts with support on learning the PTR FBA BIP model. But all of our behavior interventions We don't have a lot of behavior interventions for a plan, but we do task analyze all of them. And then once we have them task analyzed, we're able to pull out what are those core adult behaviors that we would see if we were going in and watching the behavior intervention being implemented. This in turn becomes a coaching sheet that we can provide to the teacher and say, let's practice these, or I'm going to model this first and go through this choice making intervention. If you can observe, now let's practice. Now let's do it with Jeff and let's see how this works. We're able, as you can see in the column, in the second column, we're able to have the teacher self-reflect. Yes, I did this. No, I didn't do this. And also the third column allows the teacher to say how well the teacher thinks providing choices is working on that student's behavior and improving it or not improving it. So when we're doing these kinds of things, we're using it for coaching as well as Fidelity. We always want to have opportunities to debrief and have that teacher input and reflection on how well did I do this and how well did I think it was having any impact on the child. Lets us have some starting point for working with them. This is an example, again, from our research project in which we have the coaching manual, in which we have a self-reflection form that we can use, or districts can use something very similar when they're coaching teachers. This is an example of they fill this out before a debriefing session with the coach. So in the first box, they're going to reflect on what their successes were over the past week. Where do they think that where do they think they did well? And then the second box is what was difficult for them. Instead of saying, what did you do wrong? What was hard? What did you find difficult? And then how well overall, in the third box, did I think I implemented my plan? And how much impact did I think that plan had on the student? And then this is used by the coach to do some debriefing. We also in our manual have tips for giving feedback, right? This is, again, the hard part. So again, all of these are different features or strategies for giving feedback, and everybody does the same thing. We begin with one or more positive statements. We ask the teacher for the positive reflection. We ask for reflection on areas that were difficult and give specific corrective feedback. We have examples. When we were doing this as a project, we actually, between all of our coaches who were on the project, practiced doing all of these different activities so that we were all consistent as coaches. Okay, so we get some ideas on how this would look as a coach. So again, coaching manuals are important. We will be developing in the future, and I'm going to, before we end today, we're going to have a few minutes where you're going to give us your feedback, and we're going to actually have a chat on what kind of things you want us to provide you support on for coaching in the future, specifically around Tier 3. So the last part of coaching that we're going to talk about now is how am I going to train another school psychologist or another behavior analyst or another guidance counselor, another social worker, maybe to be a coach or to be a person who is going to facilitate something like an FBA BIP. That's different than a teacher implementing strategies that are on the behavior intervention plan. The coaching tools that you have all been developed based on, again, prevent, teach, reinforce. They, however, can be adapted for any FBA BIP process. You can certainly take any of these tools and adapt them as you see fit because they're all Word version. PTR is a very manualized FBA BIP process, but it's flexible enough to, in its individualized behavior intervention strategies based on your hypotheses, based on your FBA information. The coach is the facilitator. We call our PTR coach or PTR facilitator. They guide the team and in a collaborative way, using some of those brainstorming techniques and consensus building techniques to get everyone to come to consensus on different features of each of the steps. And all of our behavior intervention plans are linked to their hypotheses. Interventions are selected by the team from a menu, which all include evidence-based strategies, and all the strategies are task analyzed. Once they're selected, we usually only have to select one to prevent problem behavior, the replacement behavior that will be taught, how to reinforce the replacement behavior or skill, and how to no longer let the problem behavior get the same function or outcome. So all plans have 4 interventions. If people want to add more, they can. We provide coaching to the teacher to implement the plan. You saw some of that information in the last few slides. If you want more information on PTR itself, because we're not going to do PTR today, you can certainly ask me. So these are the tools that we have developed for anyone who's coaching another educator or professional to facilitate FBA BIP. So the first thing is an innovation configuration map, which you do have as one of your handouts. This is a way to be able to figure out what coaching, what FBA BIP skills does the person who is being coached already have in their repertoire. So we have a 3-level one and a 4-level one. Sometimes people who are coaching their peers don't like the 4-level one because the 4-level one, level 4 is, I always call it, you need a new career level. It's basically you don't have these skills. And so sometimes that's uncomfortable for peer-to-peer coaching. So I do have a 3-level version, which you see a screenshot here of a little bit of it. So the first one is interpersonal communication skills. That's a component that goes back to what are those kind of collaborative or kind of just very nice, approachable, respectful, kind processes we need to have in order to be a good facilitator of a team, a good coach of a team. Second one is collaborative facilitation process. Do we know how to get consensus and work with a team? And then when you look at the whole thing, you'll see the next ones are specific technical skills to be able to guide teams to do FBA and BIP features. How we use this is the person you're coaching can self-assess, and they can circle or they can highlight or they can put on a form what level they think they are, with one being kind of the master level, where we would hope all coaches would eventually be, or all facilitators would be. Level 2 is they have that skill, but it may not be at the master level where they could coach or train others, but they have enough of it that they could probably do the process. Level 3 means they have some of it, but they probably need more direct help or more professional development, more coaching to improve that area. So you can use this as a personal self-assessment with the coach or the person who's being coached. And then that kind of highlights where your coaching needs to concentrate. So you want to concentrate more on those level 3s. And if you have a level 4, the level 4s, and some level 2s. Whereas the level 1s, you're going to say we don't need to use our resources for any of those skills. You can also have people do it as a post. If they do it as a pre to see how they're improving. You can also do this as a whole discipline level kind of assessment, where if you're having a meeting with all of your school psychologists or your behavior coaches, maybe they break up into smaller groups and identify areas where they think as a whole the group needs or the discipline needs. So there's a lot of ways you can use this to help figure out where you need to support your behavior coaches or your FBA, BIP facilitators. This again shows you a little bit more of someone who filled out examples of filling this out. We also have what's called a coach-coachee planning form. You do have a blank one. This breaks down every step of the FBA BIP process into a task analysis of what the person who is facilitating that team to do the FBA and then the BIP has to do in the meeting. So it's very manualized, very task analyzed. How you can use it if you're coaching someone else's, it's a way of being able to go over before the meeting even happens with the person you're coaching what has to happen in this meeting. You can practice and role play using this. You can have your person who's being coached observe you doing this while you're modeling and then be able to debrief which areas do you think that you can do next on your own independently. Which ones do you want assistance with? Or if you practice it and then you're going to have the facilitator that you're coaching do this, which ones are you comfortable doing? Which ones do you want me to do? And that is, as you can see in this second column, it says assignment. Use a little pointer here. You can see all of this. This can help you say who's going to do which steps during this meeting. Then you are able to measure fidelity. Yes, we did this step. It could be a self-assessment or it can be an observation. And then you can put some notes, and those notes can help with the debriefing. So it's a very, it's a pretty voluminous document, probably about 10, 11, 12 pages, but it breaks it down into each of the steps. You can kind of see how this looks with it completed. This is an actual one that came from someone out of state, so it's not here in Florida, so no one will recognize themselves here. And you can see that in each of these steps at the bottom, we can get a fidelity score of the person being coached. How well are they doing each step of this process? This is also another thing you can use when you're coaching others is, are their products adequate? So the TATE that we showed you earlier is something you're not going to want to do for every single FBA, BIP. That's probably more in tune for using as a baseline, and then maybe as the end of the year or post measure to see overall how well are we improving. But if you're looking at individual people's improvement of FBA, BIPs, this is a guide that can help you figure out, do they have these pieces in place for, this is showing you developing your behavior intervention plan. Do we have task analyzed interventions? Are they linked with the hypothesis? And it breaks it down by prevention or antecedent, replacement, and then reinforce interventions. And we can have, again, the coach can self-reflect using this. You can also, as being the person coaching another, can use it to evaluate their products. You can come together and see if you have consensus. You can use debriefing because you can put notes in that final column. So you have a copy of that. Again, these are all helping you get that structure that you need when you're coaching others. So this is an example of that product, again, being filled out by someone. That's the first page of it, and what we saw and what we didn't see in that particular person who was being coached to become a PTR facilitator. Some of the things that we saw that were needed in the nose. So we got a couple of you showing you, and then coaching fidelity. This comes again from our autism research project. What I like is this is a way of being to evaluate whether or not the coach in of themselves have fidelity. So you want to get those processes. What I like about this is this has a way of being able to measure not just did I do all the steps correctly, but what was my quality of coaching? How were my interpersonal skills? How was my approachability? And so we have 4 areas here, as you can see, is we can have rated on a 0 to 3 scale on how well was the coach with rapport and being responsive. How well were the communication skills. The other thing we want to look at as a coach, of course, you're always going to have data-based decision making, right? So you want to make sure that if you're coaching, you look at systems level. You're going to look at, are we making progress toward our action plan goals? Are we getting better FBA, BIPs? Are we getting improved student outcomes? Do we have, when we're looking at individual teachers or individual peers who are being coached to be facilitators, are we having good social validity? Are we having good adequate fidelity? So this is an example of a first page of a report in another state, which they're coaching other school psychologists to do better FBA, BIPs, to be able to guide teams. In fact, they've been trained to do the PTR process. And this is kind of showing you how at the end of the year, the FBA, BIPs that these trained school psychologists who are being coached by others to become facilitators, they're showing their individual student behavior improvements or no improvements as a result of going through this process. Okay, so now we have 10 minutes for discussion. So we have some ideas that we are talking about, and how are we going to provide coaching support to people out in the district so that perhaps you are able to get assistance in developing coaching processes, products, and being able to implement coaching procedures. And so our thoughts is that we would probably have this model where our project staff would train district or external coaches who can then help to train internal building coaches. So the thoughts were that you would select people at the district level who might be able to be coaches of the district, both systems level and content level, or you might have some that want to be systems level, some want to be content level coaches. We would train those people and support them, and in turn, they would then be able to train and build by using what we used with them, their own internal building coaches. internal coaches or building coaches who would then train teachers and teams to implement evidence-based strategies, because that's their eventual outcome. So one of the things and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, so I'm going to show you all the things we're going to chat on, and then maybe have you start thinking about how this is going to look and what thoughts you have. So that's our kind of a proposed model, and I'd like to get your feedback on what your thoughts are. If you think that model would work for your situations, or you think there needs to be a different kind of a model. So that would be your first input. And then we are thinking about doing professional development core to coaching. And some of it is we have to figure out how to do tier 3 processes. So some of the how to do's is people need to know if they're going to train others to do better FBA BIPs, they need to know the content of FBA BIPs. If we're going to train others to do wraparound or being able to do advanced kinds of tier 3 supports, we have to maybe provide training in some features of wraparound. We have to be able to do some systems level training and professional development, maybe on the blueprint, so that people will feel comfortable being coaches of those systems. And then how to coach, we gave you a real brief overview of a lot of our systems of coaching, our procedures, our manuals, our tools. So these are all some of the things that we might be able to do in professional development for coaching that you would get, that you in turn then could use to coach others. So you in turn could even have other coaches in your district or at the schools be able to attend and do. So how are you ethical as a coach? It's a big issue, especially for people in certain disciplines, is we need to be very ethical in how we coach, because, for example, one ethics is we can't coach something we don't really know how to do. That's kind of, if it's out of our domain, we should not be doing it. But how do we be able to help that person or the district or the team find another person who can provide that? Practice-based coaching, how to build those rapport, how to do consensus, so all those different processes. And I'd like you to reflect, I think, as this and kind of hitting the right targets, are there other things that you think we need to be addressing? And then the training formats. So should we have prerequisites? We do have a work group called Tier 3 Redesign. We find that if people are vested in working on their Tier 3 systems with Tier 3 Redesign, we then get more of a scope and sequence of how training will be implemented to meet the district's goals, so that it's in alignment with that plan. Should we have a prerequisite, or is this something you say, no, don't give us a prerequisite? What are your thoughts on that? And then for prospective coaches, we're thinking that, of course, we would do some data gathering to get baseline FBA BIPs, innovation configuration maps. We would be able to have them develop professional goals based on any of these, be able to then have networking meetings with coaches who are getting trained throughout the state by us. We're thinking, was this going to be work best virtually with online modules and virtual meetings, is a face-to-face, or a combination? So let's go back now, and maybe since you're doing that, I wonder if first, I'm going to keep this on for about 1 or 2 minutes. And I wonder if people could, in the chat box, provide ideas. First of all, is this going to work in your setting and in your role, or do you think there should be something else? Is there something missing, or a different way we should do it? So I'm going to give you guys about 60 to 90 seconds to just type in the chat box. If you could either say, that looks good, or I think maybe you're missing the target here. Have you thought about this? So Collier, oh, that's good. You can still keep typing. One of the reasons that it's showing you two at the same, it's just to show you that we're not just doing it with one coach, it's multiple coaches or multiple districts at one time, so it doesn't have to be just a one district at a time kind of a coaching process of training coaches. We're trying to think we would get a lot of coaches concurrently. Hopefully that helps. If you think that won't work, you have to tell us that as well. Okay, so let's go to the next one. What about these professional development topics? The how to do and how to coach. So the content stuff and then the coaching processes. Does this make sense? Are there other things that you see that we need to include? Is there another category? We have it down as two categories: foundations for tier three, and then how to coach in tier three. Is there something else we've forgotten? So if you could please either say it looks good if you think it looks good, or you have no opinion. You can say I have no opinion right now. I want to think about it. Something that we know we're on the right track. And if we're not on the right track, we would really appreciate getting feedback. So I'm going to give you about 60 to 90 seconds to type. So you guys can discuss this as a district. So that would be great, yeah, because if you can give us feedback, even if you could just email me, and I think my email address is at the front. A lot of you know me. That would really help out a lot. And for some of you that were maybe working with you as a district, we can follow up with you. And then what are your thoughts on the best way to do training for coaching? Is the virtual kind of modules idea, is that appealing to you guys? Do you like some face-to-face and some virtual? Do you like all face-to-face, or you like all virtual combination? What would make sense for you guys? Oh, Collier, you're doing really a focus group at the May 2nd state meeting. Excellent idea. So, yeah, so the networking meetings, for the more time to collaborate with district level peers, are you thinking that that would be something you'd want as a training format, or are you thinking that is related to your focus group idea at the May 2nd state meeting? Oh, yes, and both. Okay, thank you. Okay, not sure about the others, but I always do better in face to face. Yeah, so maybe a combination. Okay, if anyone else has ideas, you can also email me as well. As I'm never sure. Maybe Rebecca will can either chat or chime in and tell me if the chat box stays open for a little while so people can come back to this and put some thoughts in. If it's not, then I would say if you could email me, and we may have some discussion about it, or there could be some discussion at May 2nd. Oh, absolutely. So Rebecca, that means the chat box stays open for a while? Yes. Okay. Well, you're welcome, Jared. And if there's anything you saw you wish I would give to you, um, email me. I can tell you, yes, I can give that to you, or no, it's not ready for dissemination yet. Thank you all for attending, and I really appreciate it, and appreciate your feedback and any future feedback you're going to be able to give us. And have a great rest of the day.